good evening, dear listeners, and a very warm welcome to you all. Wherever you are tuning in from tonight, maybe cozied up in bed, listening from your favorite quiet corner at home, or perhaps relaxing somewhere peaceful, with the world fading away outside, I'm so glad you've joined me here. Take a slow, deep breath. Let your shoulders drop. Maybe pull the covers up a bit higher and feel the day gently slip away. Let the story begin. Hercule Poirot. The border crossing incident. International train mystery. Full audiobook. Fan fiction. The Orient Express-inspired Midnight Express was the epitome of opulent travel, where diplomats and tycoons crossed borders in velvet-lined compartments, sipping champagne amid the rhythm of steel wheels, where intrigue lurked behind polite conversations, but murder seemed utterly impossible. Then, on a stormy autumn evening in 1938, the wealthy industrialist Victor Hartmann was found dead in his private berth, his face contorted in agony. A half-empty vial of heart medication lay beside him, suggesting a tragic overdose. The border police declared it suicide, citing his recent business troubles, but the misplaced cufflink on the floor, engraved with unfamiliar initials, told Hercule Poirot a different story. The little gray cells whispered, "Murder most cunning," disguised as despair. Chapter 1. Death on the Midnight Express. The Midnight Express was the epitome of luxurious travel in the autumn of 1938, where Europe's elite crossed borders in compartments lined with velvet and polished walnut, sipping champagne to the steady rhythm of steel wheels on rails, where secrets were whispered behind closed doors, but murder seemed utterly impossible. Then, on a stormy evening departing Paris, the wealthy Austrian industrialist Victor Hartmann was found dead in his private berth, his face twisted in agony. A spilled vial of heart medication lay beside him, suggesting a tragic overdose. The border police declared it suicide, blaming his failing business empire. But a single misplaced cufflink on the carpet engraved with unfamiliar initials told Hercule Poirot a different story. The little gray cells whispered, "Murder most cunning," disguised as despair. Sound effect? The sharp slam of a compartment door in the night. Hercule Poirot stepped onto the platform at the Gare de l'Est with his usual precision, his gleaming shoes clicking against the cold marble tiles. The air carried the sharp tang of locomotive steam mixed with expensive perfumes from fur-clad passengers. He adjusted his mustache carefully, ensuring perfect symmetry, before handing his ticket to the conductor, Pierre Dubois, whose crisp linen uniform rustled as he bowed slightly. The train's whistle cut through the chill evening air, shrill and urgent. Inside Poirot's compartment, warm lamplight glowed on polished wood panels, and the velvet seat felt plush beneath him. He flicked an imaginary speck of dust from his sleeve, his mind already alert to the subtle sounds, the distant clatter of silverware from the dining car, muffled voices in the corridor, the soft creak of doors. As the Midnight Express pulled away from Paris, Poirot observed his fellow travelers with quiet interest. Victor Hartmann strode through the carriage with authority, his wife, Elena, beside him, her diamond necklace glittering against smooth silk. Nearby, the brash American businessman Reginald Thorpe argued in low tones with Hartmann, his voice rumbling like distant thunder. The elegant Baroness Olga Petrova, draped in fur that smelled faintly of mothballs and lavender, nodded to Lady Margaret Sinclair, whose crisp British accent rang like crystal. Had you been watching as closely as Poirot, you might have noticed the tension in Hartmann's clenched fist around his leather briefcase. Ah, mon ami, such small details weave the larger picture. Poirot tilted his head thoughtfully, pondering the psychology of these strangers bound together by steel rails. In the dining car, the rich aroma of fresh coffee mingled with cigar smoke from Thorpe's Havana. Poirot sipped hot tisane, its warmth spreading through him, while a cold draught from a window chilled his fingers. Crystal glasses tinkled softly with the train's motion, and footsteps padded on the thick carpet. Hartman dined alone, his face pale against the starched white tablecloth. His secretary, Miss Clara Voss, hovered nervously nearby, twisting the crisp linen of her blouse. Dr. Ludwig Brandt, the German physician in the next compartment, commented quietly on the industrialist's health, his voice calm, but his eyes watchful. As night deepened and the train crossed into Belgium, border guards' boots thudded heavily during inspection. Poirot retired to his berth, arranging his toiletries symmetrically on the cool marble washstand. The leather of his watch strap felt smooth as he checked the hour. A woman's scream shattered the silence, high and piercing like breaking glass. Poirot emerged swiftly, his robe rustling, joining the gathering outside Hartman's compartment. The door creaked open to reveal the body slumped at the desk, the air thick with a faint, bitter almond scent beneath expensive cologne. Elena Hartman clutched her velvet gloves, trembling. "My husband, he's dead!" Thorpe pushed forward, his rough wool suit brushing the frame. The Baroness fanned herself with a lace handkerchief smelling of rosewater. Poirot knelt, noting the overturned vial of digitalis on the polished wood desk. The room felt stiflingly warm from the radiator, contrasting the cold floor tiles. A clock chimed distantly in the lounge. Here, Poirot observed closely. The vial's label bore deep indentations from a pen pressed hard, as if written in anger. Not a routine prescription, but something forged in emotion, reasoned Poirot. He had seen such forceful writing before, in the Duchess of Northumberland case of 1926, where a blackmailer scrawled threats so violently that the words imprinted through several pages of a hotel notepad. The investigation spanned London drawing rooms and Scottish castles, ending with the blackmailer's arrest after Poirot traced the unique pressure pattern. Who wrote this label with such fury? I suggest you remember this detail, my friend. It will prove most revealing. The conductor wrung his hands, his collar wilting in the stuffy air. It appears suicide, monsieur. Financial ruin. But Poirot's mind rejected the simplicity. Lady Sinclair murmured, "One hesitates to speculate," but he seemed distraught. Miss Voss stammered, "I was typing in my compartment. I heard nothing until the scream, perhaps a faint rustle." Dr. Brandt checked the pulse, his leather bag creaking. The train slowed, brakes hissing in the chill night. Poirot straightened his cuffs, his intelligence already at work. The fire crackled faintly from the lounge, drawing passengers away. But did you notice, as Poirot did, the cufflink near the body engraved RT? Perhaps you have already guessed its meaning. Ah, but you say to yourself, Poirot imagines mysteries in trifles. Thorpe protested loudly. "Look here, Mr. Poirot. Business disputes don't lead to this." The Baroness observed coolly, "Such deaths are rarely what they seem." Poirot addressed the group calmly. "This is no suicide. The little gray cells. They insist otherwise." He examined his fingernails thoughtfully as the train's wheels clacked below. The aroma of extinguished wax candles lingered with cologne and flowers. Cold marble chilled Poirot's hands as he washed them later. A distant door slammed like a warning. Elena sipped brandy, its taste sharp against her tears. Velvet curtains swayed, brushing silk. What secret had Hartman carried to his grave? Chapter 2. Alibis in the Morning Light. The first pale dawn light filtered through the frost-etched windows of the Midnight Express as it rattled through the Belgian countryside. Hercule Poirot rose with his customary precision, smoothing his mustache before slipping into his immaculate suit. The compartment air still held the faint trace of last night's cigar smoke, mixed with the clean scent of polished leather from his valise, and the lingering perfume of rose water on the corridor curtains. He stepped into the dining car, where the aroma of fresh croissants and strong coffee immediately greeted him, warm and comforting against the chill seeping from the glass. Crystal cups clinked softly on saucers as the train swayed, and the velvet tablecloths felt smooth beneath his fingertips. Elena Hartman already sat at a corner table, dressed in severe black silk, stirring hot coffee with mechanical movements. Her face was pale, the diamond necklace now seeming too bright against mourning. "May I join you, madame?" Poirot asked politely, his gleaming shoes clicking on the wooden floor as he approached. She nodded without looking up. "Please, Monsieur Poirot, I cannot bear to be alone with my thoughts." Reginald Thorpe entered moments later, his heavy footsteps announcing him before his rough voice did. "Morning, Mrs. Hartman, Mr. Poirot." He dropped into a chair opposite, the wool of his suit scratching audibly against the velvet seat-back. The cigar he had been smoking outside still clung to his clothes in acrid wisps. Poirot sipped his tisane, the herbal bitterness steadying his mind while a cold draught from the slightly open window chilled his ankles. Had you been seated at that table, you might have noticed how Elena's spoon trembled ever so slightly when Thorpe spoke her husband's name. "Madame," Poirot began gently, "last night your husband mentioned certain letters. Blackmail, no? Perhaps you can tell me more." Elena set her cup down with a soft clink. Anonymous notes arrived over the last month. They demanded money, threatened to expose old business dealings from the war years. Victor burned most of them, but one remained in his briefcase. The paper was cheap, smelling faintly of cheap ink and desperation. Thorpe leaned forward. "Look here, Poirot. Business rivals play dirty. Victor had enemies in 3 countries. Doesn't mean anyone on this train killed him. But the compartment was locked from the inside," Poirot observed, fingering the cool metal chain of his watch. "And yet a cufflink belonging, I believe, to Monsieur Thorpe was found beside the body." Thorpe's face darkened. "That cufflink, I lost it 2 days ago in the lounge car. Anyone could have picked it up." "Ah, mon ami, notice how quickly he offers an explanation. The psychology of the alibi is most revealing when given too eagerly." Miss Clara Voss appeared at the doorway, hesitating like a bird unsure of flight. Her cotton blouse was crisp but slightly wrinkled, as though she had slept poorly. I was going over Mr. Hartman's schedule for Vienna," she said in a small voice. "I heard nothing unusual, just the usual train noises, perhaps a door closing once." Poirot tilted his head. "Mademoiselle, you were in the compartment directly ahead of his. You heard no footsteps? No voices raised?" She twisted a handkerchief between her fingers, the linen rustling. "I was typing. The typewriter clacks quite loudly, and then the scream." Dr. Ludwig Brandt joined them, carrying the faint scent of antiseptic and expensive cologne. Hartman's heart condition was serious, he remarked calmly. The digitalis was correctly prescribed. An accidental overdose is not impossible, especially under stress. The Baroness Olga Petrova swept in next, her fur stole brushing the doorframe with a soft whisper. In my experience, Monsieur Poirot, powerful men collect powerful enemies. Victor Hartmann was no saint. Lady Margaret Sinclair followed, murmuring, "One does so hate to speak ill of the dead, but there were rumors in London circles about certain financial irregularities." Poirot arranged the sugar cubes on his saucer in perfect symmetry, a small ritual of order amid growing disorder. The hot coffee steamed between them, its rich aroma mingling with the wax polish of the dining car panels. Let me explain something important, my friend. When multiple people offer alibis that fit together too neatly, like pieces of the same puzzle, one must ask, who arranged the pieces? The train whistle blew sharply as they crossed another border, the sound echoing like a warning. Footsteps hurried past in the corridor. Dubois, the conductor, checking tickets with brisk efficiency. His starched collar gleamed, but a faint sheen of perspiration showed on his brow despite the cool air. Poirot turned to Thorpe. "You argued with Monsieur Hartmann yesterday evening. About money, yes?" "Business disagreement," Thorpe grunted. "He owed my firm a considerable sum, but murder. Ridiculous." Elena looked up suddenly. "Victor changed his will 2 weeks ago. He told me it was to protect the company. But perhaps there was more." The crystal chandelier above tinkled gently with the motion of the train. A log in the small lounge fire popped, sending a shower of sparks against the marble surround. But did you notice, as Poirot did, the way Miss Voss flinched when the will was mentioned? Perhaps you have already guessed what shadow that casts. Poirot addressed the group quietly. "Mesdames et messieurs, the truth, she does not hide forever. Someone on this train knows more than they have said." The Baroness smiled thinly. "And you, Monsieur Poirot, intend to discover who?" "Mais oui. The brain of Hercule Poirot does not rest until order is restored." As the morning advanced, the aroma of lunch preparations drifted from the galley. Roasting meat, herbs, a hint of garlic. The cold window glass fogged where passengers pressed close to watch the passing fields. A distant door slammed, then silence. Elena sipped her now cold coffee, the taste bitter on her tongue. Whoever did this, they took more than Victor's life. They took our future. Thorpe stubbed out an imaginary cigar in the ashtray, the motion violent. "If it wasn't suicide, then find the bastard. I'll pay for the best detectives in Europe." Poirot rose smoothly. "That will not be necessary, monsieur. The investigation has already begun." He returned to his compartment, the polished wood door closing with a soft click behind him. Outside, the train's wheels sang their endless song over the rails. Inside, Poirot's mind turned, sorting, comparing, waiting for the next small thread to reveal itself. What hidden alliance, or what hidden hatred, linked these passengers across international borders? The question lingered in the air like the last wisp of cigar smoke. Chapter 3. Shadows lengthen on the rails. The midnight express thundered deeper into Germany, with the steady clack-clack of wheels on rails now sounding almost ominous in the gray morning light. Hercule Poirot had requested the lounge car be reserved for a private gathering. The heavy velvet curtains were drawn against the passing countryside, muffling the outside world and trapping inside the mingled scents of cigar smoke from the previous night, beeswax polish on the woodwork, and the faint floral perfume that still clung to several of the ladies' dresses. Poirot stood near the small marble fireplace where a low fire crackled softly, sending occasional pops of sparks against the iron grate. The warmth, fought the chill that seeped through the windows despite the thick glass. He had arranged 6 armchairs in a neat semicircle, each one upholstered in deep burgundy velvet that felt luxuriously soft, yet strangely confining under the weight of suspicion. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice calm but carrying effortlessly, "we must now speak plainly. Monsieur Hartmann did not take his own life. Someone in this carriage ended it." Elena Hartmann sat very straight, fingers laced tightly in her lap, the smooth silk of her black gloves gleaming faintly in the lamplight. Reginald Thorpe occupied the chair opposite, legs crossed, one heavy shoe tapping an impatient rhythm against the polished floorboards. Miss Clara Voss perched on the edge of her seat as though ready to flee, twisting a crisp linen handkerchief into knots. Dr. Ludwig Brandt leaned back with professional detachment, the leather of his medical bag resting beside him like a silent witness. The Baroness Olga Petrova sat with regal stillness, her fur stole draped across her shoulders, while Lady Margaret Sinclair occupied the final chair, murmuring polite nothings under her breath. Poirot turned first to Elena. "Madame, these blackmail letters, can you describe them more precisely?" "They were typed on cheap paper," she answered quietly. "Always the same machine, I think. The threats were vague but menacing. Something about wartime transactions that could ruin reputations on both sides of the border." Thorpe snorted. "Victor had enemies in every capital from here to New York. That doesn't make any of us murderers." Poirot's sharp gaze moved to the ashtray on the low table between them. Several cigarette ends lay crushed and twisted, the paper mangled with unusual force. "Observe, if you please," Poirot said, lifting one delicately between thumb and forefinger. These cigarettes were extinguished not casually, but with violence, as though the smoker were crushing not only tobacco but anger itself. He paused, letting the observation settle. "I have seen this before, in the case of the Marchmont diamonds in 1932. A young actress, under terrible strain, crushed every cigarette she smoked during the crucial days exactly so, twisting the stub so fiercely the tobacco spilled. Only when I presented her with the pattern of those mangled ends did she break and confess. The psychology of small, repeated actions often betrays more than grand gestures. Had you been studying the ashtray as closely as Poirot, you might have noticed that 3 of the stubs bore the same distinctive twist. Perhaps you can already guess who sat here last night, as smoking in fury." Miss Voss gave a small gasp. I did smoke 1 or 2. Nerves, you understand. But I was in my compartment most of the evening." Dr. Brandt spoke smoothly. "Stress manifests in many ways, Monsieur Poirot. Crushing a cigarette is hardly proof of guilt." "Alone, non," Poirot agreed. "But combined with other details—" He turned to Thorpe. "You claim you were in the lounge car until nearly midnight, then retired. Yet Lady Sinclair reports hearing heavy footsteps, American in rhythm, she said, passing Monsieur Hartmann's door after 11:30. Lady Sinclair inclined her head. One does hate to accuse, but the tread was distinctive, and there was a low murmur of voices. Angry voices. Thorpe's face reddened. "I went to the lavatory. A man can't even relieve himself without being suspected." The Baroness gave a cool smile. "In my country we have a saying, the loudest protest often hides the deepest guilt." Poirot moved to the window, looking out at the blurred landscape while he arranged his thoughts. The cold glass fogged slightly where his breath touched it. Behind him the fire hissed as a log settled. "Another small matter," he continued. The digitalis vial. The label shows indentations from a pen pressed with great force. Not the calm hand of a doctor writing a prescription, but the hand of someone under emotion. Fear, perhaps, or rage. Dr. Brandt stiffened slightly. I wrote that label myself 2 months ago in Berlin. My hand may have been hurried that day. Poirot tilted his head like a bird considering a worm. Possible. Yet the pressure is personal, angry. He addressed the entire group. Someone on this train wished Monsieur Hartmann dead. Someone had motive, money, revenge, fear of exposure. Someone had opportunity. The locked compartment is not so impossible as it seems when one considers duplicate keys or a visit before the door was secured. And someone had means. The digitalis could be replaced or supplemented with something far more lethal. The crystal decanter on the sideboard caught the lamplight and threw small rainbows across the velvet. A clock on the wall chimed the half-hour, its bells deep and solemn. Elena spoke suddenly, voice trembling. Victor changed his will only days before we left Paris. He said it was to protect the company, but perhaps he feared someone here. Miss Voss's handkerchief tore with a small ripping sound. He trusted me with everything, she whispered. I would never. Poirot regarded her kindly. Mademoiselle, a trust is a fragile thing. When it breaks, the pieces can be sharp. The Baroness leaned forward. If we are naming motives, then mine is oldest. Hartmann's father cheated my family of patents during the war. Victor knew. He profited. I have waited long years. Thorpe laughed harshly. And I'm supposed to believe a titled lady crept through a train corridor with poison? Come now. Poirot raised one hand. Enough for the moment. The brain of Hercule Poirot requires order. We shall speak again, individually. As the others rose, the rustle of silk and wool filled the room. Footsteps retreated down the corridor, doors opening and closing with soft thuds. The fire crackled once more, settling into embers. Poirot remained alone for a moment, staring into the flames. The warmth touched his face, but the chill of truth settled deeper. Human nature, he reflected silently, is a shadowed place. And in that shadow, someone on this train carries murder in their heart. The train rushed onward, carrying its secret toward Vienna. Chapter 4. False Trails and Flickering Lights. The midnight express crossed into Austria as the afternoon light began to fade, turning the snow-dusted hills outside into soft, gray silhouettes. Inside, the corridors felt narrower, the air heavier with unspoken accusations. Hercule Poirot moved quietly from compartment to compartment, testing theories the way a jeweler tests stones, gently, methodically, watching for the one that cracks. He began in his own berth, spreading the small collection of clues across the polished walnut table. The engraved cufflink marked R.T., the digitalis vial with its violently indented label, a torn scrap of cheap notepaper found wedged behind Hartmann's desk drawer. The compartment smelled faintly of beeswax polish and the leather of Poirot's valise. A cold draft slipped under the door, chilling his ankles even as the radiator hissed warmly. First visitor, Elena Hartmann. She entered hesitantly, the silk of her black morning dress whispering against the doorframe. In her gloved hand she held a small brass key. I found this among Victor's things this morning, she said, voice low. It opens a safe deposit box in Vienna. He never mentioned it to me. Poirot took the key, feeling its cool, ridged surface. And you bring it to me directly. Why? Because I no longer know whom to trust. Her eyes were red-rimmed. If there are more secrets, I want them exposed. Poirot nodded, placing the key precisely beside the cufflink. "Merci, madame. This may prove most illuminating." She had barely left when Reginald Thorpe burst in without knocking, face flushed beneath his tan. "That key. She showed you the key, didn't she? It's mine. I lent it to Victor 3 weeks ago in Paris so he could store some merger documents. If there's anything incriminating in that box, it'll be about his crooked deals, not mine." Poirot regarded him calmly. "You seem very certain of what is inside a box you have not seen, monsieur." Thorpe's heavy shoe tapped the floorboards. "I'm saying, don't let her twist this into something it isn't. Victor was drowning in debt. Suicide makes sense. Yet you argue so passionately against murder," Poirot observed. "Curious." Thorpe left muttering under his breath, the door closing with more force than necessary. Next came the Baroness Petrova, gliding in like winter mist. Her fur stole carried the faint scent of camphor and old lavender. "You are collecting keys now, Monsieur Poirot?" she asked, with faint amusement. "Only those that unlock truth, madame." She settled into the armchair, velvet cushion sighing beneath her. "If you are looking for motive, mine is oldest and cleanest. Hartman's family destroyed mine in 1917. Patents, land, honor. I have waited decades. But poison in a locked compartment? That is not my style. I would have faced him openly." Poirot tilted his head. "And yet you were seen in the corridor near his berth at 11:15. Seen by whom? The nervous little secretary. She sees shadows everywhere." The Baroness departed as gracefully as she had arrived, leaving behind only the whisper of fur against silk. Poirot moved to the lounge car, where a small fire still burned behind its iron screen. Miss Clara Voss sat alone near the window, staring at the darkening landscape. Her cotton blouse looked rumpled, the crispness gone. "Mademoiselle," Poirot said gently, "you have been avoiding me." She started. I didn't want to interfere. Yet you typed many of Monsieur Hartmann's letters, including, perhaps, replies to certain threatening notes." Voss's fingers twisted together. "Business correspondence only. But he did dictate one strange letter 2 weeks ago. He made me type it twice, said the first copy had a mistake. I never saw what it said. He sealed it himself." Poirot nodded slowly. "A mistake, or a test of your discretion." She looked up, eyes wide. "You think I think many things, mademoiselle. For now, I observe." Dr. Brandt appeared at the doorway, a black medical bag in hand. "I have examined the vial again," he said without preamble. "There are traces, not only digitalis, a faint odor of bitter almonds when heated, cyanide, almost certainly. Someone substituted or added to the contents." Poirot's eyebrows rose a fraction. "And you tell me this now?" "I tell you now because I was not sure before. The quantity was small, enough to mimic heart failure in a man already ill." Lady Margaret Sinclair joined them, pearls clicking softly against her woolen cardigan. "One does so dislike melodrama," she murmured. "But if cyanide was used, then the locked door becomes rather a red herring, doesn't it? The poison could have been given earlier, perhaps at dinner." Poirot arranged 3 sugar cubes in a perfect triangle on the table before him. "Or perhaps the locked door is exactly what the murderer wished us to fix upon. A distraction, a false trail." He rose. "I suggest we all reflect carefully tonight. Tomorrow we reach Vienna. After that, the possibilities narrow." As the others dispersed, Poirot remained by the fire a moment longer. The flames popped softly, casting flickering shadows across the velvet and marble. The cold window glass pressed against his palm when he leaned close. Outside, the first snowflakes of evening began to drift past. He spoke quietly to the empty room, or perhaps to you, mon ami, who have followed so patiently. False solutions are the criminal's oldest friend. They dazzle like stage lights, drawing the eye while the real hand moves in shadow. The cufflink, the key, the bitter almonds, all pieces. But which piece was placed to mislead? The train's whistle sounded long and mournful as it entered a tunnel. Darkness swallowed the windows for a few seconds, then the lights inside seemed suddenly brighter, sharper. When the train emerged, Poirot's expression had hardened. The web tightens, he thought. And soon, someone will feel the threads cut. He returned to his compartment, closed the door with a soft click, and sat in the small pool of lamplight, waiting for the next small truth to reveal itself in the night. The midnight express rushed toward Vienna, carrying suspicion, secrets, and one inescapable fact. Murder had been done, and the killer still walked free among them. Chapter 5. The breaking storm night had fully fallen when the midnight express began its final approach to Vienna, and the snow outside thickening into a white veil that blurred the world beyond the windows. Inside the lounge car, Hercule Poirot had summoned every passenger once more. The heavy velvet curtains were drawn tight, shutting out the storm. A single chandelier cast golden light over the burgundy armchairs, the polished marble hearth, and the low fire that crackled steadily, sending small sparks dancing against the iron screen. The air smelled of burning logs, lingering cigar smoke, beeswax polish, and the nervous perfume of several anxious women. Poirot stood at the center of the semicircle, impeccable in his black suit, gleaming shoes reflecting the flames. He had arranged 6 crystal tumblers on a side table, each filled with a measure of brandy, though no one had yet touched them. "Mesdames and messieurs," he began, a voice calm, yet carrying the weight of inevitability. "Tonight we reach the heart of the matter. No more shadows, no more half-truths. The time for confrontation has arrived." Elena Hartmann sat rigid, black silk gloves clenched in her lap. Reginald Thorpe occupied the opposite chair, legs stretched out, one heavy shoe tapping an impatient rhythm against the floorboards. Miss Clara Voss perched forward, cotton blouse damp at the collar from perspiration despite the chill seeping through the window frames. Dr. Ludwig Brandt leaned back with folded arms, leather medical bag at his feet. The Baroness Olga Petrova watched with cool detachment, fur stole draped like armor. Lady Margaret Sinclair sat very still, pearls clicking softly whenever she drew breath. Poirot turned first to Thorpe. "Monsieur Thorpe, your cufflink was found beside the body. You explained it was lost days earlier, yet the carpet bore fresh indentations. Your shoe size, your tread, directly beside the chair where Hartmann died. You were there, non? After the compartment was supposedly locked." Thorpe's face darkened. "I told you. I went looking for him to finish our argument. The door was ajar. I stepped in, saw him already. Gone. I panicked. I left. That's all. But you did not call for help," Poirot observed quietly. "You closed the door behind you. You let the world believe suicide." Thorpe's shoe stopped tapping. "I didn't kill him." Poirot moved to Miss Voss. "Mademoiselle, you typed many letters for Monsieur Hartmann, including one he made you retype, twice. You said you never read it. Yet the ribbon of your typewriter matches the typeface on the blackmail notes found in his briefcase. The same slight misalignment on the letter E." Voss gave a small, choked sound. He dictated business letters. I never—" "You loved him," Poirot said gently, "not as employer and secretary, as a woman loves a man who promised more than he gave." Tears welled in her eyes. "He said we would leave together after Vienna. He promised to divorce Elena. Then he changed his will, left everything to the company. To Thorpe." Elena gasped. "Victor would never—" Poirot raised one hand. "Patience, madame." He turned to Dr. Brandt. "Doctor, you prescribed digitalis, yet traces of cyanide were found when the vial was heated. Small enough to escape casual notice, large enough to ensure death in a man with a weak heart. You had access. You had means." Brandt's voice remained steady. "I am a physician. I do not murder my patients. Yet you comforted Mademoiselle Voss when she wept. You told her everything would be all right. You knew her secret, and perhaps shared it." The room grew very still except for the crackle of the fire and the muffled howl of wind outside. Poirot addressed them all. "Observe this small detail." He lifted the torn scrap of notepaper from his pocket and placed it on the low table. The ink smudges to the left, consistent only with a left-handed writer. Monsieur Thorpe is right-handed. Madame Hartmann is right-handed. The Baroness is right-handed. Lady Sinclair is right-handed. Dr. Brandt is right-handed. He paused. Mademoiselle Voss, however, writes with her left hand. Voss stared at the paper as though it had burst into flame. Poirot continued softly. "I have seen this before. In the Kensington forgery case of 1931. A left-handed clerk faked documents for his employer, but always smudged the ink in the same direction. Only when presented with the pattern did the truth emerge. The psychology is simple. We cannot easily change the hand nature gave us. Had you been watching Voss's face at that moment, you might have seen the exact second her composure shattered. She stood abruptly, chair scraping back. "He promised me everything. He said I was the only one who understood him. Then he laughed, and told me it was over, that I was nothing. I couldn't bear it." The crystal tumblers trembled as her hand struck the table. "I put the cyanide in his brandy glass at dinner, just a few drops. I thought he would simply sleep, but he suffered. I heard him choking through the wall. I wanted to stop it, but I was afraid." She sank back into the chair, sobbing. "The cufflink. I took it from the lounge earlier. I left it there to make them think of Thorpe. I wanted someone else blamed." Elena rose, face white. You killed my husband because he broke a promise?" Voss looked up, tears streaming. "He broke more than a promise. He broke me." Poirot spoke quietly to the room. The locked door was never forced. The poison was given openly, at dinner, before Hartmann retired and locked himself in. The cyanide acted slowly enough for him to reach his compartment, pour another drink, and collapse. The digitalis vial was a distraction, left to suggest overdose. He turned directly to you, mon ami, as though you sat among them. You have followed every clue, every contradiction. Perhaps you already guessed the truth before this final moment. The heart may love, but when love turns to possession, it becomes poison. The little gray cells do not lie. The storm outside raged louder, wind rattling the windows. Inside, silence fell except for Voss's quiet weeping and the steady crackle of the fire. Poirot straightened his cuffs. The storm will pass. Vienna awaits, and with it, justice. But in that moment, as the train slowed toward the station lights, every passenger understood. The real storm had already broken, and nothing would ever be the same again. Perhaps you, too, felt the weight of that realization settle over you like snow. Chapter 6. Echoes from Forgotten Wars. The Midnight Express drew into Vienna's Westbahnhof just after midnight. Snow swirling thickly around the platform lamps like ghostly confetti. The storm had quieted, leaving only a soft hush and the crunch of boots on fresh powder. Hercule Poirot stepped down last, valise in hand, gleaming shoes leaving precise prints beside the chaos of hurried passengers. The air outside carried the sharp bite of winter mixed with coal smoke and the faint, comforting scent of hot chestnuts from a nearby vendor's cart. By morning, the group had reassembled, not in a grand hotel, but in a private salon at the Hotel Impérial, arranged by Poirot through discreet wires sent ahead. The room was elegant. Heavy brocade curtains in deep crimson, polished mahogany tables, velvet armchairs arranged around a low marble fireplace where logs burned steadily. The warmth pushed back the chill from tall windows frosted at the edges. The air smelled of beeswax candles, fresh linen from the neatly pressed tablecloths, and the lingering rosewater perfume that followed the Baroness Petrova wherever she moved. Poirot had requested this final private session before the authorities were called. No police yet. Only the passengers, the clues and the truth waiting to be fully uncovered. He stood beside the mantel, hands clasped behind his back, surveying each face. Last night, he began quietly, Mademoiselle Voss confessed to administering the cyanide. Yet something remains incomplete. The motive she gave, betrayed love, is real, but it does not explain everything. There are older shadows here, shadow that stretch back further than a broken promise. He turned first to the Baroness Olga Petrova. "Madame, you spoke of patents stolen during the war. Tell us the full story." The Baroness straightened, her fingers smoothing the soft fur at her throat. "My father was an inventor. Chemical processes for dyes and explosives. In 1916, Hartmann's company, then under his father's control, acquired the patents through a neutral Swiss intermediary. We lost everything. The family estate was sold to pay debts. My brother died in the trenches wearing a uniform, died with colors my father helped create. Victor knew the story. He offered me nothing but polite regret when we met again in Paris last year." Her voice remained steady, but the firelight caught a glint of old pain in her eyes. Poirot nodded. "And the torn letter fragment found in your possession? I took it from his briefcase when no one was looking. It was addressed to me, threatening to expose my own small wartime indiscretion if I spoke of the patents. He was blackmailing me to keep silent." Reginald Thorpe shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "I knew about the patents," he admitted gruffly. "Victor told me years ago in New York. Said it was just business. War makes strange bedfellows. He used the money to rebuild after 1918. I didn't ask questions. I needed his capital for my own ventures." Helena Hartmann spoke next, voice low. "Victor never told me any of this. He said his father's fortune came from wise investments. If he was blackmailing the Baroness, perhaps he was doing the same to others." Poirot moved to Miss Voss, who sat pale and silent, hands folded in her lap. "Mademoiselle, you forged letters for him. Business letters, you said. But you also typed the threatening notes. Under his dictation?" She nodded once, barely perceptible. "He told me they were for competitors, to scare them off. I believed him, at first. Later, I realized he was using the same technique on people he feared, including me, when I tried to end it." Dr. Brandt cleared his throat. I prescribed digitalis, yes, but I also knew of Victor's other habits: morphine for pain, occasional cocaine for energy during negotiations. He was destroying himself long before the cyanide. I warned him. He laughed. Poirot arranged 3 small objects on the table before them: the cufflink, the safe deposit key, the torn letter fragment. He placed them in perfect alignment. Now we see the pattern. Monsieur Hartmann did not merely profit from war, he continued to feed on its secrets. Blackmail was his final business. And when one victim turned against him, he paused, letting silence fill the room, except for the soft crackle of logs and the distant chime of a clock in the corridor. Had you been sitting among them, mon ami, you might have felt the weight of those old wounds opening like frost-cracked stone. The war ended in 1918, but for some its poison lingered in ledgers, in memories, in quiet hatreds carried across borders. Poirot spoke again, more softly. This case reminds me of another, Venice, 1927. 2 families, the Contarinis and the Morosinis, feuded over a single Renaissance painting stolen during the Austrian occupation. Each accused the other. Each held secret documents. Poison was used not in wine but in coffee, during a reconciliation dinner on a gondola. The killer was the one who arranged the meeting, believing exposure would destroy both houses. I unraveled it by tracing the chain of possession. Every hand that touched the painting left a psychological mark. In the end, the murderer confessed on the steps of San Marco as bells tolled midnight. Revenge, you see, is patient. It waits decades, if necessary. He looked around the circle. Victor Hartmann thought he could control the past by controlling its secrets. But the past has its own will. It rises like smoke from a long-buried fire. The Baroness inclined her head slightly. "And now?" "Now," Poirot said, "the authorities will take statements. Mademoiselle Voss will face trial for murder, though her act was born of desperation more than calculation. The blackmail will be exposed. Reparations may be made. The patents, perhaps they can be returned in name, if not in law." Elena rose slowly. "I will not contest any claims on the estate. If Victor profited from theft, then I will not keep what was never truly his." Thorpe grunted. "I'll cooperate. My firm can survive without dirty money." Poirot regarded them all with quiet satisfaction. The storm has passed. Vienna is peaceful this morning. Order begins to return. He addressed you directly then, as though you stood beside him at the window, watching snow settle on the rooftops. "You have traveled with me through suspicion and revelation, mon ami. You have seen how the past does not die. It merely waits, and how one small act of vengeance can echo across years and borders until it finds its mark." The fire settled with a soft sigh, embers glowing faintly. The old wars were over, but their ghosts had finally been laid to rest, not by forgetting, but by facing them in a warm room in Vienna, under the calm gaze of Hercule Poirot. Outside, the city woke slowly beneath fresh snow, clean and silent, as though the world itself had drawn a careful breath. Chapter 7. The Gathering of Truth. The private salon at the Hotel Imperial had been cleared of breakfast trays and transformed once more into a theater of revelation. Heavy brocade curtains were drawn against the bright mid-morning snowlight, allowing only soft glow from wall sconces and the steady fire in the marble hearth. The air carried the comforting sense of beeswax candles, fresh linen napkins folded on side tables, and the faint trace of pine logs burning cleanly. Velvet armchairs had been rearranged into a perfect circle. Poirot's insistence on symmetry even now. Every passenger was present, seated, with the stiffness of people who know the end has come. Elena Hartman wore simple black wool today. No diamonds, her hands folded quietly. Reginald Thorpe sat with arms crossed, jaw set. Miss Clara Voss occupied a chair slightly apart, eyes downcast, wrists already lightly bound by soft cord, at the request of the hotel manager pending police arrival. Dr. Ludwig Brandt sat beside her, protective yet resigned. The Baroness Olga Petrova maintained regal posture, fur stole draped like a mantle of old dignity. Lady Margaret Sinclair fidgeted with her pearls, the small clicks audible in the quiet room. Hercule Poirot stood at the center, impeccable, hands clasped behind his back. His gleaming shoes reflected the firelight as he turned slowly, addressing each in turn. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, voice measured and calm, "we have traveled far together, across borders, through suspicion, into the very heart of human frailty. Now, the moment arrives when all threads are drawn together. There will be no more evasion." He moved first to Miss Voss. "Mademoiselle, you have already confessed the act. Cyanide in the brandy glass at dinner. A few drops, enough to mimic heart failure in a man already ill. You believed it would be gentle. You were wrong. You heard his suffering through the thin compartment wall and did nothing. That is the burden you carry." Voss nodded once, tears falling silently onto her lap. Poirot continued, "But the method alone does not explain the full design. The locked door, the cufflink, the forged label on the digitalis vial, all these were meant to point elsewhere. You wished suspicion to fall on others. On Monsieur Thorpe, whose cufflink you stole from the lounge ashtray, on Dr. Brandt, whose prescription you altered slightly with your own hand." Brandt spoke quietly. "I suspected her intention when she asked me about dosages 2 days earlier. I said nothing. I hoped she would not act." Poirot inclined his head. "You protected her silence, Doctor, out of compassion or complicity?" "Compassion," Brandt answered. "She was broken long before she acted." Poirot turned to Thorpe. "Monsieur, your financial motive was obvious. Hartman owed you a fortune. You argued violently the night he died. Yet you did not kill him. You merely stepped into his compartment after the fact, saw the body, and, fearing implication, closed the door and walked away. That moment of cowardice cost you dearly in suspicion." Thorpe's shoulders sagged. "I thought, if it looked like suicide, the debt died with him. I was wrong." Poirot addressed Elena next. "Madame, you knew of the changed will. You feared losing everything. Yet your grief was genuine. You are innocent of the act, though not of knowledge. You suspected your husband's secrets long before this journey." Elena whispered, "I wanted to believe him better than he was." The Baroness spoke without prompting. "And my motive was oldest, revenge for a family destroyed. Yet I did nothing. I watched. I waited. In the end, someone else delivered the justice I once dreamed of." Poirot raised one hand gently. "Precisely, madame. The murder was not yours, but the chain of events that led to it began with the sins of the past, sins in which many here were complicit, if only by silence." He stepped to the center again, voice rising slightly with the rhythm of finality. "Now, let us reconstruct the sequence with order and method." He lifted one finger. "First, Monsieur Hartman blackmailed several of you over wartime profiteering and personal secrets. The letters were typed by Mademoiselle Voss under his direction until she became a victim herself." Second finger. At dinner, Mademoiselle Voss added cyanide to his brandy. The dose was small. Death would come later, slowly, convincingly resembling heart failure. Third finger. Hartman retired, locked his door from inside, a habit. The poison took hold. He suffered. He died at his desk. Fourth finger. Mademoiselle Voss, in panic, he entered later, using a duplicate key she had obtained from the conductor weeks earlier for clerical purposes. She planted the cufflink to implicate Monsieur Thorpe, and adjusted the digitalis label to suggest overdose. He paused, letting the fire's crackle fill the silence. Voila! The truth. The words hung in the warm air like a bell struck once. Voss lifted her head at last. I didn't want him to suffer. I only wanted him gone. He had taken everything, my trust, my future, my dignity. I thought poison would be clean. Poirot regarded her with something close to pity. Murder is never clean, mademoiselle. It leaves stains on the soul that no confession can fully wash away. He turned to the room. The police will arrive shortly. Statements will be taken. Mademoiselle Voss will face justice in Vienna. Monsieur Thorpe will settle debts honorably. Madame Hartmann will honor any legitimate claims on the estate. The Baroness will see her family name cleared of old lies. Dr. Brandt will continue his work, wiser. Lady Sinclair will return to London with a story she will never fully tell. He addressed them all, and perhaps you, mon ami, who have followed every step. You have witnessed the unraveling of a human heart pushed beyond endurance. You have seen how one small betrayal can ignite a chain of destruction across years and borders, and you have seen that in the end, order returns, not perfectly, not painlessly, but inevitably. The fire settled with a soft hiss. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing Vienna in quiet white. Poirot straightened his cuffs one final time. The little gray cells have spoken. The case is closed. He moved toward the door as distant footsteps approached. The police at last. In that moment, the room felt strangely peaceful, as though truth itself had drawn a long, slow breath and released it into the warm, candle-lit air. The gathering was over. The truth had been spoken, and for the first time since Paris, no one carried murder in their heart. Chapter 8. Justice descends on Vienna. The snow had stopped falling by the time the Vienna police arrived at the Hotel Imperial, their boots leaving dark prints on the marble steps of the grand entrance. Inside the private salon, the fire still burned steadily, but its warmth now seemed almost superfluous. The chill of finality had settled over the room more deeply than any winter wind. The heavy brocade curtains remained drawn, muffling the distant clatter of trams and the soft murmur of the city waking under fresh white. 2 plainclothes inspectors entered first. Inspector Karl Weber, tall and grave with a neatly trimmed beard, and his younger colleague, Sergeant Lucas Hahn, notebook already open. They carried the faint outdoor scent of snow and coal smoke on their wool overcoats. Poirot greeted them with a small bow, gesturing toward the circle of armchairs where the passengers waited, in near silence. "Gentlemen," Poirot said quietly, "the matter is clear. A full confession has been made. Statements are ready." Inspector Weber nodded once, eyes sweeping the room with professional calm. He removed his hat, revealing thinning hair, and placed it carefully on a side table, beside a crystal vase of white lilies, whose scent mingled oddly with the wood smoke. Miss Clara Voss rose first, wrists still lightly bound. Her cotton blouse was creased, her face pale and streaked with dried tears, but her voice when she spoke was steady. "I poisoned Victor Hartmann," she said simply. "Cyanide in his brandy at dinner. I intended for it to look like heart failure. I planted the cufflink to cast suspicion elsewhere. I have nothing more to hide." Sergeant Hahn began writing swiftly, the scratch of his pen loud in the quiet room. Voss continued, recounting the betrayal, the broken promises, the moment she decided death was preferable to further humiliation. Her words were measured now, almost rehearsed, as though speaking them aloud had finally drained the last of her rage. Helena Hartmann listened without interruption, hands folded in her lap. When Voss finished, Helena spoke softly. "I do not forgive you, but I understand, more than I wish to. Victor destroyed many lives. Yours was only the last." Reginald Thorpe cleared his throat roughly. "I was there after. I found the body, saw the vial, panicked, closed the door and left. I thought suicide would settle the debts. I was a fool." Inspector Weber raised one eyebrow but said nothing, motioning Hahn to note the admission. The Baroness Olga Petrova spoke next, voice cool and precise. "I held no hand in the act. My grievance was old and known. I waited for justice in my own way, through law, not poison. But I will testify to the blackmail. The patents stolen from my family will be restored in name, if not in fortune." Dr. Ludwig Brandt leaned forward. "I suspected her plan. I did not act to stop it. That is my failing. I will answer for it." Lady Margaret Sinclair murmured, "One does so hate these final scenes. But truth must be spoken." Poirot stepped forward, addressing the inspectors directly. "The sequence is simple. Poison administered openly at dinner. Death delayed until the victim reached his locked compartment. The digitalis vial left as misdirection. The cufflink planted in haste. Motive: betrayed love compounded by years of manipulation. Means: access to cyanide through laboratory contacts in Paris. Opportunity: the intimacy of the train." He paused, then added with quiet emphasis, "There are no other guilty parties. The case is complete." Inspector Weber studied Poirot for a long moment. "You have done our work for us, Monsieur Poirot. We will take formal statements now. Fräulein Voss will be taken into custody. The others will remain available for further questioning." Two uniformed officers entered quietly from the corridor. They approached Voss with professional gentleness, removing the soft cord and replacing it with steel handcuffs that clicked shut with a small, final sound. She did not resist. As they led her toward the door, she turned once, looking at Poirot. "You saw everything," she whispered. "Even the parts I tried to hide from myself." Poirot inclined his head. "The human heart, mademoiselle, is not so complicated when one observes with order and method." The door closed behind her. The room seemed suddenly larger, emptier. Helena rose slowly. "I will return to Paris tomorrow. The estate will be settled honorably. Any claims, old patents, old debts, will be honored." Thorpe stood also, shoulders squared for the first time in days. "I'll wire New York. The merger dies with Victor. I'll pay what's owed. No more shadows." The Baroness smoothed her fur stole. "My lawyers will handle the rest. Vienna has been kind to me today." Dr. Brandt gathered his medical bag, leather creaking softly. "I will continue my practice, perhaps with greater caution." Lady Sinclair touched her pearls one last time. One returns to London wiser, if sadder. Poirot moved to the window and drew back one curtain just enough to let in pale winter light. Snow lay thick on the rooftops opposite, clean and undisturbed. The city beyond moved about its ordinary business, trams clanging, vendors calling, life continuing as though no murder had crossed its borders. He turned back to the room. Mesdames et messieurs, the stain of suspicion is lifted. Justice, though imperfect, has arrived. Go now. Live with what you have learned. The passengers filed out one by one, footsteps echoing in the marble corridor. Helena paused at the door, looking back at Poirot. "Thank you," she said simply, "for seeing what we could not." Poirot bowed slightly. "It is my métier, madame." When the last of them had gone, Inspector Weber remained a moment longer. "You will give evidence at the trial." "Mais oui. Hercule Poirot does not abandon a case half finished." Weber extended his hand. "Then Vienna owes you a debt." Poirot shook it briefly. "No debt, Inspector, only order restored." The inspector left. Poirot stood alone in the salon. The fire had burned low, embers glowing faintly on the hearth. The scent of lilies and beeswax lingered soft and peaceful now. He straightened his cuffs one final time, smoothed an invisible crease from his sleeve, and walked to the door. Outside, Vienna lay quiet beneath its blanket of snow. A new day had begun, clean, cold, and free of murder. The consequence was paid. The truth had been faced. And in that quiet aftermath, the world turned once more toward ordinary light. Chapter 9. Order Restored. By late afternoon, the snow in Vienna had begun to melt under a pale winter sun, turning the streets into glistening mirrors that reflected the spires of St. Stephen's Cathedral and the golden dome of the Secession Building. Inside the Hotel Imperial, the atmosphere had shifted dramatically. The private salon, once heavy with suspicion, now felt almost serene. The brocade curtains had been drawn wide open, allowing slanted sunlight to fall across polished mahogany tables and velvet armchairs. The fire still burned low in the marble hearth, but its crackle was companionable rather than tense. Fresh lilies had replaced the wilting ones. Their clean, sweet scent mingled with beeswax polish, hot coffee from silver pots, and the faint trace of expensive cologne that had followed the passengers since Paris. Hercule Poirot sat at the head of a long table near the window, a small porcelain cup of tisane steaming before him. Around him, the remaining passengers had gathered, not summoned this time, but drawn together by a shared need for closure. No police remained. Statements had been taken. Miss Clara Voss had been removed to the central prison to await trial, and the machinery of Austrian justice had begun its slow, methodical turn. Helena Hartmann sat closest to Poirot, dressed now in soft gray wool rather than stark black. Her hands rested calmly on the table, no longer clenched. Across from her, Reginald Thorpe occupied a chair with more ease than he had shown in days. His rough wool suit brushed clean, cigar left unlit in his pocket, out of respect for the room. The Baroness Olga Petrova had chosen an armchair near the fire, her fur stole folded neatly over one arm. Dr. Ludwig Brandt sat beside her, medical bag absent for the first time, hands folded quietly. Lady Margaret Sinclair completed the circle, pearls gleaming softly in the sunlight, a faint smile touching her lips for the first time since the journey began. Poirot spoke first, voice gentle yet precise. "Mesdames et messieurs, the storm has passed. The murderer has confessed. The truth has been laid bare. Now it remains only to see what emerges from the wreckage, what new order can be built upon the ruins of the old." Helena inclined her head. "I return to Paris tomorrow. The estate will be settled quietly. Victor's will stands, but I have instructed the lawyers to honor any legitimate claims arising from the wartime patents. The Baroness's family will receive formal restitution, symbolic, perhaps, but sincere. The Baroness inclined her head in return. I accept with gratitude, madame. Not for the money. My family's honor was never measured in francs, but for the acknowledgment. After so many years, that is enough. Thorpe cleared his throat. I've already wired New York. The merger is canceled. I'm liquidating Victor's shares in my firm at fair value. No more hidden debts. What's left will go into a trust for war orphans. It won't erase what happened, but it's a start. Dr. Brandt spoke quietly. I have submitted my resignation from the clinic in Berlin. Too many questions would follow. I intend to practice in a small town in Switzerland, perhaps near Lake Geneva. A quieter life, fewer opportunities to fail those who trust me. Lady Sinclair touched her pearls thoughtfully. One returns to London tomorrow as well. I shall tell no one the full story, not in salons, not in letters. Some truths are too heavy to carry in conversation. But I shall remember, and perhaps I shall be kinder to those who seem nervous. Poirot nodded slowly, his eyes moving from face to face. Each of you carries away transformation. Madame Hartmann, from grieving widow to guardian of restitution. Monsieur Thorpe, from angry creditor to man seeking balance. Baroness, from bearer of old wounds to one who has seen them recognized. Doctor, from silent enabler to one who chooses solitude over complicity. Lady Sinclair, from observer to quiet witness. He paused, lifting his tisane cup and turning it once in his fingers before setting it down again. The setting itself has changed. The Midnight Express, once elegant, once sinister, now resumes its journeys as merely a train. The compartments will be cleaned, the carpets replaced, the memories left to fade with new passengers. Vienna, too, returns to its rhythm. Snow melting, streets drying, life flowing onward. He addressed them all, and perhaps you as well, mon ami, who have followed this long journey from Paris to here. You have seen suspicion give way to truth. You have watched a community bound by fear slowly untangle itself and find, if not forgiveness, then at least understanding. The human soul is capable of terrible things, yet it is also capable of repair. Not perfectly, not without scars, but with order, with method, with the courage to face what has been done. The sunlight shifted, catching motes of dust that danced like tiny sparks in the air. The clock on the mantel chimed softly. 4 o'clock. Outside, church bells answered in the distance, deep and resonant. Elena rose first. I should like to walk in the Prater before dark. The snow is beautiful when it is fresh. Thorpe stood also. I'll join you, if that's all right. No business talk, just walking. The Baroness smiled faintly. I shall visit the Kunsthistorisches Museum. There's a painting there. My father loved it. I have not seen it in 30 years. Dr. Brandt gathered his coat. I have a train to Zurich tomorrow. Tonight I shall sit in the hotel library and read. Something peaceful. Perhaps poetry. Lady Sinclair touched Poirot's sleeve lightly as she passed. One is grateful, Monsieur Poirot. Truly. They left one by one, footsteps fading down the marble corridor. Poirot remained seated a moment longer, watching the sunlight lengthen across the carpet. Then he spoke quietly, as though to the empty room, or to you. What have you learned from this affair, mon ami? That murder, though born of passion, ends always in regret. That secrets carried across borders weigh heavier than any luggage. That justice, when it comes, is rarely dramatic. It arrives quietly, in a sunlit room in Vienna, with ordinary words and ordinary promises. He rose at last, smoothing an invisible crease from his sleeve. The fire had burned down to glowing embers. He crossed to the hearth and nudged a log back into place with the poker, watching fresh flames rise. Order had been restored, not perfectly, not without cost, but sufficiently. Outside, Vienna continued its quiet afternoon. Inside, the salon stood empty and peaceful. Poirot walked to the door, paused once to look back at the sunlit room, then stepped into the corridor. The case was finished, and in its place remained only the gentle question that lingers after every solved mystery. Was justice truly blind? Or did it see at last, with clear and compassionate eyes? Chapter 10. Reflections on the rails. Hercule Poirot had taken the afternoon Orient Express back to Paris, choosing a first-class compartment that overlooked the snow-dusted fields of northern France. The train moved smoothly, its wheels singing a gentle, rhythmic lullaby over the rails. He had arranged his small valise with meticulous care on the overhead rack, his toiletries placed symmetrically on the polished walnut shelf beside the window. The compartment smelled faintly of beeswax polish, fresh linen from the crisp antimacassars, and the comforting herbal steam rising from his tisane cup. Outside, the winter sun was low, casting long golden shadows across frost-covered meadows. Poirot settled into the deep velvet seat, smoothing an invisible crease from his sleeve, and gazed at the passing landscape. The events of the past week replayed in his mind with the clarity of a well-ordered film reel, each scene precise, each detail significant. He sipped his tisane slowly, the hot liquid warming his throat against the chill that seeped through the window frame despite the radiator's steady hiss. News had reached him by telegram that morning, delivered on a silver salver with his breakfast. Elena Hartmann had returned to her Paris apartment and announced the establishment of a foundation for war orphans, funded in part by the restitution of the stolen patents. Reginald Thorpe had dissolved the disputed merger and transferred a substantial sum to the same foundation, publicly stating that old debts must be paid, even when the creditor is gone. The Baroness Olga Petrova had been received at the Austrian embassy with full honors. Her family's name was formally cleared, and a small exhibition of her father's original patent drawings would open in Vienna next spring. Dr. Ludwig Brandt had taken up residence in a quiet village near Lausanne, where he now treated patients with the same skill but greater humility. Lady Margaret Sinclair had resumed her London salons, though friends noted she now listened more than she spoke. The conductor, Pierre Dubois, had been quietly dismissed, but found new employment with a reputable Paris hotel, his small family safe from scandal. And Miss Clara Voss. Her trial would begin in Vienna in the spring. The evidence was overwhelming, her confession complete. Yet the judge had already spoken privately of leniency, the motive of betrayed love and years of psychological manipulation weighed heavily in her favor. She would serve time, but perhaps not the full sentence. Poirot hoped, quietly, that she might one day find peace. He set the cup down and leaned back, fingers touching the ends of his mustache in a brief, thoughtful gesture. The little gray cells had rested for a time, but now they stirred again, turning over the deeper truths of the affair. In this border-crossing incident, Poirot reflected, one saw the classic pattern of the poisoned mind. Love, once pure, had become obsession. Obsession had become possession. Possession had become destruction. Mademoiselle Voss had not killed merely because she was scorned. She had killed because she had been made to believe that her worth depended on another's promise. Victor Hartmann had wielded power over her soul as deftly as he had wielded it over patents and ledgers. The cyanide was merely the final instrument. The true weapon had been years of subtle cruelty. This case reminded Poirot of another from the summer of 1929 on the French Riviera. A young heiress, beautiful and fragile, had poisoned her fiancé after he threatened to expose her family's wartime collaboration. The poison had been administered in champagne at a garden party in Noce. The victim had collapsed beneath an olive tree as fireworks burst overhead. Poirot had unraveled the case by noticing the way the girl arranged flowers on the table, always in perfect symmetry, yet with one bloom deliberately crushed. That small detail revealed her inner turmoil, the desire for order warring with the chaos of guilt. In the end, she had confessed on a moonlit terrace overlooking the sea, tears falling like the petals she had destroyed. "I wanted him to love me," she had whispered, "but I made him fear me instead." Poirot gazed out at the passing fields, now touched with the rose of sunset. Universally, he mused, murder is always a mistake. The human mind craves harmony. When it commits violence, it creates a discord that can never be fully silenced. The guilty live in perpetual shadow, hearing echoes of their own act in every quiet moment. They may escape the law for a time, but they cannot escape themselves. The little gray cells of the innocent may rest. Those of the guilty burn forever. Yet there is hope. In this affair, the guilty had confessed. The innocent had been vindicated, and even those complicit through silence had stepped forward to make amends. Order had been restored, not perfectly, not without pain, but sufficiently. The midnight express would run again, its compartments filled with new passengers unaware of the tragedy that had passed through them. Vienna would welcome spring with open arms. Paris would continue its elegant dance. Poirot straightened his cuffs and rose to adjust the small brass lamp above his seat. Its soft glow fell across the compartment, warm against the deepening blue of evening outside. He returned to his place, folding his hands neatly in his lap. "And you, mon ami, who have traveled this journey with me from the Gare de l'Est to the Hotel Imperial and back again, what have you learned? You have seen how one small detail, the pressure of a pen on a label, the twist of a cigarette end, the direction of an ink smudge, can illuminate the darkest corners of the human heart. You have watched the little gray cells work, not through magic, but through patient observation and relentless logic. You have understood that crime is never truly hidden. It leaves traces always. And you have seen that truth, when it comes, brings not only justice, but also the possibility of healing. The train slowed as it approached the outskirts of Paris. Lights began to appear in the distance, street lamps, windows, the warm glow of homes returning to life. Poirot looked out once more, watching the world slide past in orderly procession. Until the next mystery calls, mon ami, let us carry this lesson forward, that order and method are not merely tools of detection, they are the very foundations of a civilized life. The brain of Hercule Poirot rests now, satisfied. The train whistle sounded softly, a gentle farewell to the journey's end. Poirot closed his eyes for a moment, letting the rhythm of the rails soothe him. Outside, the first stars appeared above the frozen fields. The case was closed, and in the quiet compartment, lit only by the soft lamp and the glow of memory, peace reigned at last.